towards the end of the chapter, and there it talks about what is hishtahvaya, what is prostration. It explains that prostration is in the same halakha. It, by the way, states that kneeling is upon the knees. Right. So basically, the answer to your question about the bowing in the Shema Esrei is that the term that they're translating as bowing with regard to the 5 bows in the Shema Esrei, and the term that they're translating as kneeling later on in the chapter are the same exact word. It just happens to be that when it comes to the 5 bows of the Shema Esrei, they didn't translate it as kneeling, and it doesn't necessarily mean kneeling in all situations, which is why the law goes on to clarify kneeling is upon the knees, keeping in mind that this word that they're now translating as kneeling is the same exact word used previously, kuri'ah. The verb is lichroa, which kuri'ah ha'amra b'chol makom al birkayim, that the bowing kuri'ah mentioned in every place is upon the knees. You have to answer that. If you want to mean that taking 3 steps back can't be on the knees. And you also have to take into account the fact that the bowing which a king and a priest does is clearly done upon the knees, as is explicit from the Talmudic sources for these laws. And Hazan, the Talmudic sages, simply applied the same type of bowing to the regular individual when he prays, and only made a difference in the amount of times that he bows during the prayer, and at what places that he bows. So you also have to ask the question with regard to the high priest and the king. Even though we know that they definitely bow upon their knees, how do they go and take 3 steps backwards? My basic way of understanding is that when it says in chapter 5 of Hilkhoth Tefilla that the 5 bows are done by arching over enough where your backbones protrude, that's because the term for bow here, kuri'ah, it's a general term for bending down. Alright? So if every time kuri'ah is mentioned is to be done on the knees, then when you come to the 5th bow at the end of the standing prayer and you've bent upon your knees, so once it comes to taking 3 steps back, you simply stand back up upon your feet while remaining bowed over. So you're at the end of the prayer, you go down, this is one kuri'ah, you just need to bend over enough that the backbone is through. I go like this to hold my kippah on, it's too small. So then when you want to take 3 steps back, you just get back on your knees and you stay bowed over. This is still one kuri'ah, one bow, it's the same bow. But you did it while upon your knees, and now you're taking 3 steps back. That's all, they're not 2 separate bows. And then it says when you take 3 steps back, you pick up your head, you lift your head.
Halakha 13, prostration. What is implied? After one lifts his head from the 5th bow, he sits on the ground, falls with his face towards the earth, and utters all the supplications that he desires. Now it says kneeling always refers to falling on one's knees.
There, that's the word I was talking about. This is the same exact word as used before with regard to the 5 bows.
And that's what, and Omid Yashar on his website seems to say that the bowing is actually kneeling. So I don't know, because then it says bowing is...
I think now you understand it better, I hope.
Bending over on one's face. And then it says prostration is stretching out on one's hands and feet until he is flat with his face to the ground. The response that I get from Orthodox Jews is that since we have no temple, we cannot prostrate anymore. That was only allowed when there was the temple standing.
Yeah, I've not yet gotten a source for that law. I think that this is just a common misunderstanding regarding a Torah prohibition against prostrating onto stone. We are only allowed to prostrate upon cut stone in the temple premises. Outside the temple premises, we're not allowed to prostrate upon cut stone. But that doesn't mean that we're not allowed to prostrate. It's very obvious from many places in the Tanakh You see, for example, there's a passage where David HaMelech, King David, is prostrating towards the temple while present on the Mount of Olives. Then you also have the passage in the book of Psalms, in Tehillim, where it says, let's prostrate towards his holy mountain. So clearly they're not on the holy mountain when they're prostrating towards the holy mountain. Alright, let's continue.
Is when reading the commentary at Chabad.org. Anyways, so it's just interesting that in their own, that Chabad members do not prostrate, except maybe on Yom Kippur, I'm not sure. And in their own
and that's funny. Suddenly on Yom Kippur, the prohibition against bowing outside the temple is just nullified, and suddenly everybody can prostrate.
Commentary seems to suggest that you should prostrate on their website, and I don't understand. And it doesn't ever mention that you don't prostrate when the temple is there.
The reason it's on their website but they don't do it is because Chabad only uses Mishneh Torah for getting a broad perspective on Talmudic law, but they don't go by every single law that appears in Mishneh Torah or all the laws that appear in the Talmud when it contradicts with the practices that they pretty much inherited from the generation before. Well, I'm not going to try to defend it because I'm not Chabad.
And I find a proof in their commentary that the Rambam prostrated when obviously there was no temple when he was alive. And then the Tur Orach Chaim 131 states that the reason for prostrating oneself as Shemona Esrei, or the Amida, is that by doing so one prays in all three positions of prayer employed by Moses. Sitting during the verse of praise, and I sat on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, Deuteronomy 9:9. Standing during the Shemona Esrei, and I stood on the mountain as on the first day for 40 days and 40 nights, Deuteronomy 10:10. And then prostration, and I fell down before God, as at first, for 40 days and 40 nights, Deuteronomy 9:25. And I believe that's a post-Talmudic document, though I'm not sure.
It's a post-Talmudic document. The Tur is after the time of the Rambam even. It's one of the main bases for the Shulchan Aruch.
In which case the temple probably wasn't standing when that was written. Okay, now here's...
Yeah, that was a great point you made, by the way. Thank you for the sources.
What I really wanted to say in this video, because I've never seen anyone mention this online, so it's kind of new information. In the Seder Tefillot Kol Hashana, the Rambam writes, okay, so this is the Rambam talking, the writer, the author of the Mishneh Torah, and a sage who lived well past the time of the temple, okay? It is our custom, meaning Maimonides, the Rambam's custom, to make supplication while prostrated with these statements and verses. So according to the Rambam, he prostrated post-temple.
Thanks for the proof. I hadn't noticed that particular proof for it, but you're absolutely right. In the Mishneh Torah itself, he says that Kol Yisrael noagu, all of Israel are of the custom to lay out mats and straw or carpets in their places of worship in order to separate between their faces and the floor, because it is prohibited to prostrate on stone. So that's already enough. And he there doesn't say just his community, he says Kol Yisrael, all of Israel are of this practice.
And so it seems to me that prostration is allowed even though there's no temple, and in such it is encouraged because the Mishneh Torah directly says it's one of the things that you should be careful to do, although it's not necessary.
But it also says in the first halakha of chapter 5 that even though it is not something which invalidates a prayer if you don't do it, that the person who does not do so has transgressed, unless of course he was forced or pressured. I want to give one other way that it's understood that you can do the fifth bow of the Amida and take 3 steps back, and that is by doing it upon your knees. Now if you're doing it on all 4 hands, you could call it crawling, but if you're in a bowed position and you don't use your hands to go back, I don't see why that can't be called taking 3 steps. I'll give you a quick demonstration. You just take 3 steps back, you give peace to your left and to your right, and then you lift up your head. And that's the way that some people who I very much respect explain that it's to be done. And there's a general principle in halakha that when it's something rabbinic and you have a disagreement between different opinions as to what is the right way, when it comes to Torah law, we have to take the strict opinion. But when it comes to a rabbinic decree, so one is to take the lenient opinion.